Hello guys, welcome to the next session of developing e-commerce application from scratch using Angular and Spring Boot. In the last session we discussed on how we can place the orders. So right now I'm logged in as a user and I'm on my home page and I'm able to see some of the products. Let's suppose if I just want to buy any product like this third product, then I can click on the view details and then I can get some of the information. I can see the images as well. And let's suppose if I click on the buy now button, then what we have to do is we have to just fill the form and then we can place the orders. So after filling this form, we have to place the order. So like this particular screen is divided into two different sections. On the left hand side, we have all the form details, and on the right hand side, we don't have, as of now, at least we don't have anything. So here what I want to do is I want to generate a bill. So I just want to show a bill or amount and to the user, so that user can estimate like what is the cost and what will be the final cost that user have to pay. So that I just want to, like, in the right hand side section, I just want to show the invoice or bill, you can say that, which will be related to this particular order. So in this session we are going to see that how we can generate that particular bill so that we can show it to the user. So let me just first of all show you like how the order gets placed. So let me just fill my name, which is, let's suppose, Raj. Then address will be, let's suppose, Mumbai. Contact number, let's suppose I'm just placing some random numbers like this, and alternate contact numbers will be something like this. As of now I am not able to see any information which is related to the product that I'm going to buy, but it is going to place the order on which we clicked on the buy now button. So if you just see the product ID is equals to 5 in the URL, but as of now we are not able to see any information on about the product in this particular section. So let me just click on place order, and order is placed. If I just go to the database, so let me just take you to the MySQL, and let me just do one thing. Let me just select from order details table, and if you just see like row number 20 or order ID 20, like order is getting placed. And if you just see like order full name is Raj, contact number is 000, and alternate contact number is 1111, and alongside I'm able to see the amount, which is 1150, and alongside I'm able to see the order address, so which is Mumbai, and order status is equals to placed. And who is going to place the order? So over here we are able to see the username as well, like by which user the order is placed. So we are able to see this particular information right now, but we just want to show it onto the UI. So let me just quickly show you how we can do this. So now let me just take you to the VS Code. Over here, let me just take you to the buy product component. So previously in the last session we created this buy product component. So let me just take you to the HTML, and if you just see, we have two different parts. Like we have one row, and that row is divided into 6 columns, and there is another another division which is having the 6 columns. So we have to remove this particular lorem ipsum that I had just added for the references, but we have to remove it. So let me just remove it, and over here let me just use one table. So to show the bill, I'm just going to use a table. So why table, or how it will look like, we can just see, but as of now I'm going to use a table so that we can show all the information in a very structured manner. So let me just use table. Inside table, let me just use t head, something like this, and then after the t head we have to use t body. So let me just use t body like this. In a t head, let me just use one table row, which means tr, and inside this let me just use th, which means table heading. So I'm assuming that you have some knowledge about the HTML, and you are like aware about this, how to create a table and all. So let me just give the table heading as name, and we want 4 different columns. So let me just create it for 4 times. Second column will be the amount. Third column will be the quantity. and fourth column will be the total, something like this. And now let me just save this particular code. Let me just go to the Google Chrome. Let's see what is happening right now. So as of now we are able to see something like this, but we want to apply some class so that we can like this particular table should look bit beautiful, so that we can apply some bootstrap classes. So now let me just come back to the VS Code, and for the table let me just apply one class that is called as a table, and this table is basically a bootstrap class, so we can just add it. And I hope you know something about the bootstrap. And let me just apply class for t head as well, and class name itself is a t head. For t body, let me just apply one more class which is called as a t body, like this. And now let me just save this code. Now if you just come back to the Google Chrome, you will be able to see that like there are some styles which got applied for this table. Now inside this table we have to show all this information like product name, the amount, the quantity that we are going to buy, and the total that the total of the product, and the final total like grand total which we have to show to the user. Now let me just come back to the VS Code, and first of all let's focus on how we can show the basic details like name and amount and everything. So in this what we have to do is, let me just come back to the body and let me just apply one tr, which means table row, and inside this we have to use td, something like this. Now on this table row we have to use ng4. So why ng4? Because there might be multiple products and we want to loop through those products, so we have to apply the ng4. But before that let me just take you to the ts file, and if you just see, there are two important variables that we are going to use. On line number 15 we have one variable that is called as a product details, so it is basically array of all the products. And on line number 17 we have something called as a order details. So order details is basically a object that we are going to send to the backend so that order is going to order can be placed. So order details is a object which we have to send to the backend. Product details is an object or array which contains all the information about the products that we are going to buy. So for example, if I'm just going to buy, so let's suppose if I'm on home page, and if I'm just clicking on the second product, and if I'm just clicking on the buy now button, so product ID is equals to 3 as of now. So if I'm just clicking on the buy now product, now product ID 3, so all the information which is having the product ID 3, all this information is stored into these product details. So product details is nothing but a array which will contain the information about the the product that we have selected. And then order details is the object which we are going to send to the backend. So these are the two main objects that we are going to use. And then if you are aware about the last session itself, then we have used these inside the ng on init, we have fetched the product details like information about the products that we have selected, and we have used a resolvers as well. So I hope you have seen that particular session, because if you are not aware about this, then I think this particular session will also not help you to understand. So now again, product details contains all the product information. Order details is a final object that we are going to send to the backend. So now what we have to do is we have to iterate over these product details inside our table. So now let me just come back to the tr. Let me just use ng4 is equals to let product of, and let me just copy this particular name, let product of product details. Inside the td we have to use interpolation. So what we can do is we can just use product dot product id, something like this, and then if you are not aware like what is the key, then what you can just do is you can just check out our product interface. You will get to know that what are the keys, and also you can just use the console.log and you can just log the product details, and then you will get to know the keys as well. So let me just show you how it looks like on a console. So if you just see, we have one array, and this particular array is nothing but a product details. Inside array we have this particular information. So we have the product ID, then product name, product description, like every single thing that we want. Now let me just come back to the HTML. Over here we don't have to show the ID, because as of now I just observed we are showing the ID, but we don't want to show the ID, we want to show the name. So let me just make it as a product name like this, and we are able to see the product name. Then we have to show the amount as well. So let me just add one more TD, and we have to show product discounted price. Like this, and we are able to see the discounted price as well. Then we have to show the quantity, and lastly we have to show the total. Now the quantity and the total, like we have to use some drop down and everything for the quantity. The reason is because user can buy any quantity. By default it will be a one quantity, but user can select 2 or 3, 4, 5, whatever quantity that user want. So for this we have to use drop down. So let me just show you how we can use the drop down as well. Let me just add one more TD over here. Inside this particular TD, let me just use select, and then let me just remove this name and ID. As of now we don't require it. If we require, we will just add it again. And then let me just apply one class as well. So let me just apply the class that is called as a form-select. So form-select is again a class which comes from a bootstrap. So we have to apply that class, and then what we have to do is we have to just use option, and then value will be the 1, and inside these inside the option we have to use a 1 as well. So value is 1, and on the UI we also want to show the text as a 1. So let me just copy it for 3 times or 2 times, and let me just use 1 2 3 and 1 2 3, something like this. So we will apply, like we will allow, like minimum quantity is 1 and maximum quantity is 3. We will just apply that constraint, and maximum quantity that user can select is a 3. If you want, you can just make 4 or 5 as well. So you just need to add, suppose if you want to restrict for the 4, then you have to just add one more row, and you can just apply it as a 4, something like this. But as of now I'm just going to keep it as a 3 only. So let me just remove it, and let me just keep it as a 3. Now let's see what is happening on the UI. So on the UI we are able to see like one drop down, and we are able to see 1 2 3, something like this. But again we have to use a binding over here. So let me just show you how we can bind it. So on the select, let me just apply the binding. So in this we have to use ng model is equals to, and in the ng model what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call one function. So I'll just show you, like I'll explain everything, but I'll just show you right now the code, and you can just type it as it is, but in a moment I will explain everything. So let's suppose the function name that I'm going to call is get quantity for product, and inside the bracket we have to pass the parameter which is like product ID. So let me just use product ID, something like this. Now over here, if you just see in the ng model, I'm not going to add any normal or parenthesis. I'm just adding the square parenthesis, which basically means that we are just going to there are two different bindings. First one is a event binding and second one is a property binding. So we have to use this particular binding over here. Now this particular function is not created, so we have to create this function in a TS file as well. So let me copy the name of this particular function, and let me just come to the TS file, and let me just create this particular function, something like this. We don't require the product.product ID, so we have to just use product ID as it is, like this. Now where quantity is stored, so if you just see in order details, we have one array, something called as a order product quantity list. If you just go to this particular order details interface, and on line number 8, if you just see, there is one list which is having name as order product quantity list. If I just open this particular order quantity, then we are able to see the two different properties. First one is a product ID and second one is a quantity. So whenever we will come to this page for first time, then it will by default create one entry for having the product ID, and it will just give the default quantity as a 1. If I just show you the logic, that particular logic is written over here. So if you just see, whenever we will come to the ng on init, what we will just do is we will just insert one record into a order details. We will just insert it product ID, and we will just insert the quantity as a 1. So default quantity is a 1, but we can just change it, right? So in short, the quantity is stored inside this particular array. So from this particular array, we have to fetch the quantity, and then we have to bind it to the select or maybe the drop down that we have. So let me just do one thing. Let me just write some code over here. So what we have to do is we have to just use this dot order details dot order product quantity list dot filter. We have to use a filter, and let me just inside the filter, let me just use one variable. You can give any name. So let me just use product quantity, and then we have to use a arrow, and let me just use product quantity dot product ID is equals to 3 times equals to product ID. So what I'm going to do is, from the array, like from the order product quantity list array, I'm just going to filter out the record which is having this particular product ID, which we are passing from the UI. And once we received that one, let me just store it to the one variable. Let's suppose const filtered product is equals to something like this. And from this filtered product, what we have to do is filtered product. So again, filtered product, it will it will be an array, because the filter returns us the array. So we have to access the 0th index of it, and then we have to use quantity, something like this, and whatever quantity that we have to return it. So let me just use return keyword in front of it, something like this. Now let me just come back to the Chrome, and as of now we are able to see the default quantity as a 1. But let's suppose if I just change the default quantity, for example, just to check whether my logic is working fine or not, let me just change the default quantity to the 2 on line number 33, and now let me just save it. And now if I just come back to the Chrome, I will be able to see that the default quantity is selected as a 2. So it is working perfectly fine. Let me just make it 1 again, and now let me just save it. Now we are able to see the quantity perfectly fine. Then lastly, what we have to do is we have to calculate the total as well. So let's see how we can calculate that particular total. So to calculate total, what I'm going to do is I'm just again going to create one function. So let me just come back to the HTML. So now we have to add one more TD over here. Let me just add it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just again going to use interpolation, and I'm going to create one function to calculate the total. So let me just use get total, or we can say that get calculated total, like this. And here we have to pass two different parameters. First parameter is a product ID, and second parameter is its discounted price. So let me just use product dot product ID, comma, we have to pass second parameter, that is product dot product discounted price, something like this. And now this particular function is not yet created, so let me just copy this function name let me just come back to the TS file, and over here we have to create this particular function. Now what this function will do, it will just take two different parameters. First one will be a product ID, second one will be a discounted price, and then it will just calculate the total and it will just return that particular total. So in this body, again what we have to do is we have we have the two different parameters, product ID we have and product discounted price we have, but we require a quantity as well, right? So what we can just do is we can just call this particular function from here, or else we can directly call it, or else we can just directly create logic something like this, and we can just fetch the quantity and then we can just calculate the total price. So you can just directly call this particular function, but let me just quickly show you how we can use the second way as well that I just talked about. So in these, let me just use this dot order details dot order product quantity list dot filter. Again the exact same logic that we have used in the above, and then let me just use product quantity, then we have to use a arrow, and then let me just use product quantity dot product ID triple equals to product ID, something like this, and it is going to return us the filtered product. So let me just use const filtered product is equals to something like this. Again filtered product will be an array, so let me just use filtered product, 0th index of it, and then we have to use a quantity, and then what we have to do is we have to just make multiplication, and then we have to just multiply it by the amount. So let me just use product discounted price like this, and whatever calculations will happen, we have to just return that particular calculated price, something like this. And now let me just save it. Now let me just come back to the Chrome, and if you just see, like amount, the product amount is 1200. As of now we have selected quantity as 1, and that is the reason the total is equals to 1200. But let's suppose if I just change the quantity to the 2, then in this case the total also should be updated, right? Because like if the quantity is 2, then total should be the 2400. So that is not updating over here. So let's see what we can do to update that particular total. So now let me just come back to the HTML file, and then on select, what we have to do is we have to just apply one event that is called as a change event. So let me just use event binding, and let me just apply one event that is called as a change event, and let me just use let me just call one function that is like on quantity changed, something like this. And this particular function again takes one value, like it basically takes the quantity that we have selected. Like initially it was 1, but let's suppose if we just select it as a 2 or a 3, then we want that value as well, and then we want a product ID as well. So how we can fetch the selected value? It is pretty simple. We can just give one name to this particular select element. So let me just use one name that is called as a quantity, and with the help of this particular name, what we can just do is we can just use quantity dot value, something like this. So in this way we can just access the value that we have currently selected in this particular drop down. So quantity hash quantity is basically a name which we have assigned to this particular element, and then with the help of this particular element we can just access it something like this, quantity dot value. So we got the value, then we want a product ID as well. So let me just use product ID as product dot product ID. So let me just give it as a second parameter. Now again this function is not created, so we have to create this particular function. So let me just copy the function name and let me just paste it over here, something like this. So let me just remove the unneeded information, so we can just skip quantity dot product id. On quantity change is a function. So now once quantity is changed, then we have to perform very small thing. What we have to do is we have to just use this dot order details dot order product quantity list. Again we have to just use filter, and again what we have to do is we have to just call a callback function or arrow function, we can say that. So let me just use order product or product order, you can just give any name, I'm just giving some sensible name over here. And then we have to just filter out. How we can filter out? Order product dot product id triple equals to quantity, not a quantity, triple equals to product id, something like this. And at the end it is going to return us the array. So over here, instead of creating a new variable, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use 0th index, something like this, and after that I'm just going to access the quantity, and whatever quantity that we have currently, we just have to update it. So how we can update it? We can just give equals to, and then we can just give this particular variable value over here, something like this, and let me just give the semicolon. If you are getting confused, you can just change the variable name and you can just keep it something like this, only q, and we have to just apply q over here. So whatever quantity that we have received for this particular product, we are just going to update that particular quantity. So I hope you are getting this particular thing. So once the quantity is updated, like everything will be updated as expected. So now let me just come back to the Chrome, and now again quantity is 1 and amount is equals to 1200. Let me just select the 2. So now if you just see, the total is updated, which is like 2400. So everything is working perfectly fine. So 2400 is basically a total for this particular product, but we want to show a grand total as well, because as of now we are just going to buy a single product, but in the future we are going to work on a cart functionality as well. So in the cart functionality we might have the multiple products involved, we might have 5-10 products. So at the end we have to show the grand total as well. So what is the grand total of this particular list? So let's see how we can show that grand total. So again, doing this is really very simple. Let me just come to the HTML file, and then let me just do one thing. Let me just add one more row over here. So after our tr, let me just apply one more tr, something like this. And for this tr, let me just apply tds. So let me just use 4 times tds. So let me just use something like this. So I'm just going to apply the 4 times tds. Among it, I'm just going to use third td, and I'm just going to use total like this. And let's suppose if I'm just hard coding some value like 3000. As of now I'm just hard coding some value, but in a moment we are going to change it. And now let me just save it, and now let's see how it looks. So now if you just see, it is looking perfectly fine. So it is using the word that is called as a total, and it is giving the grand total. So like I'm just using this simplest way, like I'm just using some empty td, and for last td I'm just using the total and 3000. But if you want, you can just use row span, like we have multiple ways, so you can just use that way, but this is the simplest way that I found, so I'm just using it right now. So now this particular 3000 we don't want to hard code, we just want to calculate it. So let's see how we can do this. So again, to calculate it, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call one function. So let's see, let me just create one function like get calculated grand total, like this, and it is not going to take any parameter. So let me just copy the name, and let me just come to the ts file of it, and let me just paste that name over here, and we have to write some logic so that we can calculate the grand total. So again, it is really very simple. Let me just do one thing. Let me just use let grand total is equals to 0. I'm just creating one variable and I'm just initializing it to the 0. Then what we have to do is we have to just use this dot order details dot order product quantity list dot for each. So this time we have to use a for each because we want like every single element to go through this calculation process. So we have to use a for each. Inside a for each, again we have to use a callback function. So let's suppose if I'm just using product quantity, something like this. So product quantity, then we have to use a arrow, and then what we have to do is like again we have to iterate over the array. So like order details will basically help us to get the quantity, right? Because like order details contains the product ID and its associated quantity, right? But we want its price as well, correct? So price, where the price is stored, so price is basically stored in a product details. So again we want to iterate from this product details. So inside this, what we have to do, we have to just use this dot product details dot filter, and then let's suppose for the product details I'm just using the name as product, something like this, and I'm just filtering out the product with the help of this product ID. So product dot product ID is equals to product quantity dot product ID, something like this. And again it is going to return us the array because filter always returns the array. That is the reason we have to access the 0th index of it, and for the 0th index we have to access the product's discounted price like this. So let me just use dot discounted price. Now let me just store it to the one variable, let's suppose something called as a price, and whatever price we have, what we have to do is we have to just use price into product quantity dot quantity, something like this, so that price will be calculated. But again what we have to do is whatever calculations are done, we want to store it back to the grand total variable. So we have to just do grand total is equals to grand total plus price into product quantity dot quantity. So I hope you are understanding this particular logic, because grand total, let's suppose like we have the 3 different products. So first product, like we will iterate over it and we will just, let's suppose whatever amount of first product is, let's suppose 1000, that 1000 will get stored into a grand total. For the second product, the amount is, let's suppose 500. So 1000 which was the first product price and the 500 which is the second product price. So we want to add both, like 1000 and 500. So collectively we want to make it as a 1500. So that is the reason we have to use grand total is equals to grand total plus price into like product quantity dot quantity, something like this. And then lastly we have to just return the grand total. So let me just return grand total like this, and now let me just save this code, and now let's see what happens. And now if I just come to the Chrome, then we have the painting combo 2, then 1200. Let me just change the quantity, let me just make it as a 3, and now if you just see, the total is 3600 and grand total is 3600. So it is working perfectly fine. Now let me just try to place the order. So let me just give a name as, let's suppose Harsh, full address let's suppose Pune, contact number is, let's suppose something like this, and alternate contact number is something like this. And now let me just place the order, and now order is placed. And if I just come to the table, database table, let me just refresh it, and order 21 is placed. And if you just see, like order amount is 3600. So whatever we calculated on the UI and whatever actually stored in the database table, those are matching, so there is nothing to worry about it. So it is working perfectly fine. And every other thing like name and address, it is also working perfectly fine. And lastly we have the username, like who have placed the order. So Raj123 is a username who have placed the order. So again it is working perfectly fine, and product ID is equals to 3. So every single information is working perfectly fine. The only thing that we have is we are not be able to change this particular bill, or suppose like if you just focus on the left hand side section, we are able to reset the bill, but we are not be able to reset the generated bill. Or like in the left hand side section we are reset the form fields, but on the right hand side we are not be able to reset the bill. So don't need to worry about it, because anyway we don't require to reset the bill, because what we are going to implement is once we placed with the order, so we are going to implement one new page on which we are going to give thanks to the user who have placed the order. So we are going to show some messages like on the next screen, like thanks for placing the order, and if needed we are going to show the order details as well. So we are again going to move out of this particular page, so that is the reason we don't need to worry about it. So that like how we can take, like once the order is placed, then how we can take user to the next page and how we can design that page, we are going to see into a next section. So I hope you got an idea like how we can generate a bill, and I tried my best to to like explain every single thing, every single steps which is involved. I know there are some calculations involved, and we have used some arrow functions and all, but it is just about understanding how to use arrow functions and in which variable what we have stored. So that is really very important thing. Like you want to make sure that in which variable which information is stored, and so that you can easily access it. So this is the only thing that we must have to understand. But other than this, these particular calculations are really very easy. If you are following my series from like pretty start, then you must be knowing about this particular variable. Or else if you don't like if you are using any other variables or any other way, then you can just implement and you can just use your own variable names, and like you can just use your own information over here. So I hope you got an idea around this one, and I hope you enjoyed this session, and I'll see you in the next session.